Welcome to today's live stream. My name is Arlene Pelicane. I am the spokesperson for National Marriage Week. You're here because you want to make your marriage stronger, and we have assembled an amazing panel of experts who are specialists in this area and who are ready to give of their time to help you. So we are so glad you're here. If you happen to be sitting next to your spouse, grab their hand. We are in for a treat. You know, every February 7th to 14th, we celebrate National Marriage Week. This is a campaign, a movement of people who want to declare to the world that marriage is good. It's good for us, it's good for society, and it is good for nations. So this year's theme is Together with Purpose. And that's why we're here, because we believe the purpose of marriage is worth fighting for, worth learning about and getting better at. So let's get started.
Hello, viewers. I am so delighted you've joined our National Marriage Week panel discussion tonight. I'm Amy Morgan, your moderator this evening. Our topic tonight is about leaving a lasting legacy. How do you and your spouse look forward to the impact you'd like to have in the world? Maybe it's with your family, but there are ways to look beyond your home. Or maybe there's been something you regret in your life. You and your spouse can redeem your stories and together leave the world with something beautiful. Let's meet our guests and learn from their wealth of experience. I am so delighted to introduce them to you. Sharon Jaynes has been encouraging and equipping women through ministry for more than 30 years. She served as vice president of Proverbs 31 Ministries and co-host for their daily radio feature for 10 years and is a best-selling author of 26 books. She currently writes Proverbs 31 Ministries, Encouragement for Today devotions, and has been married to her husband, Steve, for 45 years. They have one grown son who lives 767 and a half miles away. And yet he has counted them. Francine Pirola lives even farther away than Sharon's son. Based in Sydney, Australia, she and her husband, Byron, are the co-founders of Smart Loving, a global marriage formation apostolate that primarily serves the Catholic community. They began serving in their first year of marriage, have been volunteers for more than 37 years, raised 5 children, and now are looking forward to their 6th grandchild. Jim Burns is the founder of Homeward. He speaks to thousands of people around the world every year and has more than 3 million resources in print in more than 20 languages. His popular Homeward with Jim Burns podcast is on all the major platforms. Jim writes and speaks primarily on Homeward's values: strong marriages, confident parents, empowered kids, and healthy leaders. Jim, you have written so beautifully about how the story your marriage tells leaves a lasting imprint, not only on your home and children, but generations to come. You've said the way you love, lead, and live out your faith becomes a lasting spiritual inheritance, shaping the future in profound ways. You have 3 daughters and several grandchildren now. Can you share some ways you and Kathy have passed on your values?
Yeah, well, you know, it's so important. And it sounds, when we talk about leaving a lasting legacy, that we have to do it perfectly, and no marriage is perfect. Kathy and I have been married 51 years, and we have what we call a high maintenance marriage. We had a high maintenance marriage going into it. And although, you know, we're in it for the long haul, you know, we've had to have a high maintenance marriage. And that doesn't mean we can't leave a legacy for our kids. So for us, we realized we had to be the transitional generation. The Bible talks about you inherit the sins to the previous generation for 3 to 4 generations. I came from an alcoholic background, my family background, not me. Kathy came from just kind of a crazy background. And we said, we're going to be the transitional generation. And to do that, it meant we've had to roll up our sleeves. And yeah, we have to play at marriage. Today, I'm in Honolulu, Hawaii.
Yay!
So we're having some fun. You can see on the background, this is the back of the hotel room I'm in. But you know, we've had to work at it. And so for us, it meant we wanted to make sure that our kids were going to be the part of that transitional generation too, and change the trajectory. So for us, that meant non-negotiable date nights early on. It meant us taking the lead at helping our kids, because our kids live pretty near us, taking the lead by, you know, babysitting for their date nights and when they go away on a weekend. So we're coming back home to do February 14th. So one of our daughters and her husband can, you know, go on a date, and we get the grandkids. Such a deal.
Oh, it's a win-win. And
It is.
you also encourage them sometimes to come and hear you speak or learn some premarital skills too.
Yeah, that was the mistake one time. Heidi and Matt, my youngest, they didn't know I was speaking on rekindling romance, and I was talking about, really kind of sexing it up. And I watched my daughter just get lower and lower and lower in her seat, going, I can't believe I have to listen to my father talk about that. So, there's times when it's great and there's times when it's not. But yeah, they come to our events. They actually have fun at our events. People then check on it and say, so is your dad telling the truth? What about your mom? Those kind of things. So, we got to be on top of our toes. But yeah, we find that if they come to some of our events, we have a big event in March, and I think 2 of the 3 are coming. Yay.
That's so wonderful. And then you have such a sweet thing that you do with your grandchildren.
Yeah, in terms of the legacy, well, Kathy, interesting enough, 10 years ago, James came into our life. He's named after me. And so my heart kind of got wrapped around his at that moment. But Kathy said, I'm going to be she retired. Her specialty is working with kids who have autism. And she said, I'm going to retire and be a fully engaged grandma. And so we get a lot of time with our grandkids. She watches them 3 days a week. I end up coming home from work earlier. I've read through the Bible, children's Bible, with James 3 times. I didn't do that with my kids. And so I've just found that you can do those kinds of things more and more. And that's the legacy part of it. But they also need to see grandma and grandpa still kind of like each other. They need to see grandma and grandpa going on those dates. They need to see grandpa and grandma kiss. They need to see us. Christy, and my oldest daughter, was on a television show with me recently and said, what did you learn from your mom and your dad? Thinking it was going to be all romantic. She said, I really learned how to deal with conflict. They do conflict well. I'm like, oh, great. Right. But in reality, that's what we want to see is to build that legacy doesn't mean to be perfect, but it means to be real and vulnerable. Today's young people, whether you have adult children or whether you have 2-year-olds, what they want to see is authenticity. The Bible says, the man or woman of integrity walks securely. So I think we just need to have marriages of integrity and do what we need to. We know what to do. We just don't sometimes do it.
Oh, I love that. Well, Francine, you are literally the continuation of a legacy. Both your and your husband's parents were founders of the Catholic marriage ministry movement in Australia. You mentioned seeing a sentence in the Catholic nuptial blessing that was prayed over you 38 years ago coming to fruition. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, look, I'd love to, Amy. Look, it really stood out to us. There's a lot of words in a wedding day, but this one, may they be blessed with children and prove themselves virtuous parents who live to see their children's children. And it was, I guess, resonated with me because we had, not all, but some of our grandparents there. Only 3 of them were surviving at the time of our wedding. But it was just that resonance of this ongoing thing that speaks a lot to, I think, our topic today. Marriage is just associated with children, and it was really clear for us back then, 38 years ago. I don't know that that's the case for some people marrying today in some cultures, particularly the Western cultures. That's a bit of a radical idea to suggest that marriage and children are intrinsically linked. Marriage is often seen as just about personal fulfillment. And not about family formation. So I would like to see that reinforced and modelled by more couples today. Oh. We're seeing an increase in that childless by choice movement, which just breaks my heart because children are such a beautiful fruit of our love. And yes, it's really hard. There's been some of our lowest points as a couple with those sleepless nights with a screaming baby that we couldn't agree on a strategy of how to get that child back to bed and asleep so we could show up again the next day. Really sort of some darkest times in our marriage were at those when we had really little children. But there's also so much joy and blessing. And we're seeing now as our children, all adults, are forming their own marriages and starting families. It's just next level joy for us to be able to relish that and support them in that. So there's this blessing. And we're also seeing our parents, because all of our 4 parents are still alive, with their great-grandchildren. And they're just the envy of their peers because many of their peers don't even have grandchildren. And here they are, they've got 6 great-grandchildren. So there's this blessing, this intergenerational blessing, but also support that is so critical. And Jim, I love what you and your wife are doing. Just such a radical witness of self-gift to support the next generation. And we really need to normalize that more, I think.
Oh, well, my mother-in-law has been with us for the past couple of weeks, and it's my nephew and his wife are expecting what will be her first great grandchild. So we are all very excited about that in the family. But legacy can impact far more than just your immediate family. Sharon, you have a grown son, and you made a point to welcome his friends into your home. So much so that you were able to step into something really special when your son's friend had a crisis. Can you talk about that?
I did. We only have one child, and that was not our choice. That was the Lord's choice for us. But when we figured out that that was going to be what our home was going to look like, we decided we were going to have lots of children. They just weren't going to have our last name. So we were the home in the neighborhood that was always the fun home where the kids came. But you know what? I feel like I need to back up a little bit and tell you why that happened. Because much like Jim, I was raised in a home with an alcoholic father and a very bitter mom. So my growing up years, I saw things a kid should never see. I heard things a child should never hear. But there was a woman in my neighborhood. And when I was about 12 years old, I started spending time down at my friend's house. And I saw what a family that works looks like. And I loved Mrs. Henderson. And Jim, you'll like this because Mr. and Mrs. Henderson hugged and kissed all the time in front of us. And honestly, I'd never seen married people act like that. I was always afraid of my dad and tried to stay away from my mom, and was the kid who just pulled up the covers and prayed I'd go to sleep to shut out all the yelling and the screaming. But when I went down to the Hendersons' home, it was peaceful. I thought she was a little weird because she talked about Jesus like she knew him personally, and that was odd to me. But in my family, as bad as we were, we went to church on Sunday. And I couldn't have said this when I was 12, but we had a religion in our life. But when I was over at the Hendersons, I saw a relationship with Jesus. And that was very different. And I ended up coming to Christ when I was 14 through this woman. And then 3 years later, my mom came to Christ too, again, through this woman. So for me, I wanted to be Mrs. Henderson. I did not have the model at home to follow. And, you know, when you grow up in a home like that, all of us have a choice who have that situation. We're going to repeat it or we're going to do something different. And I made the choice I was going to do something different. So met my husband at a Bible study in college, got married pretty quickly. And like I say, 45 years ago, but we wanted to make sure our home was like the Hendersons' home in our neighborhood. And some of the kids thought your parents are really strange, but they sure are fun. So, you know, they say if you feed them, they will come. The boys came. Yes. They had a great time. Steve was their basketball coach, their baseball coach. And it was our goal as when my son was growing up to be that influence, to be that safe place. And we have seen how that has left a legacy with the kids that we were able to impact then. And you know what? He just turned 42 last week, and we're still getting to do that. He lives in Chicago, and this is the story you were mentioning. As we've been around his friends, and he has a lot of friends that aren't Christians and don't know Jesus and don't have a very good opinion of religious people, as they would say. But you know what? They've been around us and they say that we are fairly normal people, that we love the Lord. And when one of his friends, and this is what you just mentioned, one of his friends had cancer. And I emailed his wife, and she calls me mom, by the way. But I emailed the wife and said, listen, give me his chemo schedule. And I'm going to send you a prayer every morning when he goes into chemo. And, you know, they've never had anybody to do something like that before. And so that's a way we can leave a legacy of people that aren't in our family, just like Mrs. Henderson, who is now 95, just celebrated her birthday, how she has left a legacy in my life. And then think of just because I get to do ministry, all the people that really she's impacted through that. Yes. Interaction with that 12-year-old little girl and that 14-year-old little girl who became a Christian. So that's a great legacy that we can leave, no matter what our family's like and no matter what our past family was like as well.
Oh, I love that story. And I'm just thinking about all these little pinpricks of light of all the people that have exponentially grown because of she told One little girl. Okay, you're making me cry. Okay, Jim, you told me your family opens your home on Christmas Eve to friends and neighbors, kind of your outreach. Can you tell us what happened this year?
Well, actually, we've done it for 40 years. And this year, our youngest daughter said, so we're going to change the tradition because we want to do something. You guys can keep doing it if you want. And we did it by accident 40 years ago. It was our church. We had just started a church. And we found there was a lot of singles who didn't have a place to go. And so that night we just ordered Chinese food and we kept going. So Heidi and Matt and my other daughter, Rebecca, they both live in Los Angeles. We live in Orange County, California. They ended up starting their tradition of doing it at their house. And they actually had others come too. And then my daughter, Christy, and her husband and the grandkids and some of their friends, is kind of a little bit like Sharon. People just show up. And we barely had enough Chinese food this time. But so she said, no, we're going to start our own tradition. And we've said to our kids, look at, we want to celebrate with you Christmas. We want to celebrate with you Thanksgiving. But it doesn't have to be on the day. Because what we never wanted to be was the in-laws who, were trying to take the kids away from the other, in-laws or whatever. And so, we do that. And we do that pretty well. We've celebrated Thanksgiving on 2 weeks before, and we've celebrated Christmas 1 week after, but we get everybody together. But little Heidi, she decided she has a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and she said it's time, and I love that. I mean, I think that happened in our life. We finally said, look, we're going to do our own thing as our kids, were coming into the house, and our parents had to do that. It doesn't mean you don't honor them, but you also have to protect your own family traditions and start new ones too.
And I just love how they took that spirit of, the more the merrier, let's invite others.
Right.
And be the village. Well, Francine, you also advocate for the witness of hospitality in the home.
Yeah.
Yeah. And look, I'm so inspired, Sharon and Jim, by your stories of from really difficult circumstances, the way you've flipped the script and turned it around and become such beacons in your community. And it resonates with me because we've always understood that what we have materially, which our largest asset is our home, should be an asset for the community, particularly the faith community, and for the purposes of mission, but also just our neighbours, many of whom are not believers. And so just that sense of this home, we're not just sharing our home though. When people come to see us or visit us here, they're experiencing us. And we like to compare it a little bit to seeing animals in the wild. If you go to the zoo and they're in a cage, it's an artificial environment. It's completely a different experience to going to see them in their native environment. I've never been on safari in Africa, but people tell me it's just mind-blowing to see the big mammals in their native environment. And I think when we bring people and open our homes, particularly, they're experiencing and encountering us in our native environment. And so much of how we decorate, the bills on the kitchen counter, the washing waiting to be folded, whatever it is just an expression of our life. And so there's that added dimension, completely different to hosting hospitality, say in the parish church or, in a street party, which is still important and valuable, but something really important about the home. So just hats off to you both. That's amazing what you're doing there. It really resonates.
Well, and you talked about even letting the youth group use your pool, which I would imagine would be quite popular in Australia.
Oh yeah. The pool's always a great gathering place, and for our kids and their friends, but also for the parish youth group, which we weren't the leaders of at the time, but we were always happy to have it. And in fact, what became a great asset was we had a people mover, a Tarago, for our family, and the parish priest was always borrowing it to load the youth group in it to drive to Melbourne, which is a big drive. It's about a 12-hour drive for a retreat and for training, and then to drive them back. So we were always, just delighted to be able to.
Francine, what is a people mover?
Oh, a people like a big car, which you can put 7 or 8 people in it. So you might call it like that.
It sounded so cute, and I'm like, I have no idea what that is. Is it a van?
It wasn't quite a minivan, but I guess that's what you'd call it in America.
I was thinking escalator or something.
Oh, okay.
I
I guess
love
a
it.
cultural translator. We speak the same language, but different cultures.
Yes, I love it. We all think we're speaking the same language, but maybe not quite. Well, another thing that you all agree on, maybe not people moving, but we all agree on, is how important it is for people to see spouses' genuine affection for each other. We've already brought that in. Sharon, you talk about being religious but fun, and you were that example, and you had a few little nuggets of what that looked like.
Yeah. Now, first of all, I want to say I don't really like that word religious. So I'm quoting Stephen's friends
Yes.
when that's what they would say. Let me give you just one example. So he went to Christian school for 9 years and then decided he wanted to go to public school. And when he went to public school, he had a lot of more friends that were not Christians. So, and they're a lot of them didn't have a mom and a dad at home. It was just a whole different situation. So we loved on those kids. Again, they would love to come to our house. And like me and the Hendersons, a lot of them had not seen a healthy marriage before. So that was fun for them. But one night, he was a senior and it was his birthday. So we decided we were going to do a formal dinner party for them. There was girls and boys. And I think almost all the girls were believers. They were more his friends from church, but some of the guys on the track team were there and they got all dressed up. And my husband and I served them the mini courses. And then I'd asked Stephen's permission before I did this. But I said, now, since you're going to be graduating this year, I would like to pray a blessing over each one of you. So I went around the room and I just laid my hand on their shoulder and prayed a blessing over each one of the kids. And when I finished, one of them said, well, that was weird. But then after dinner, we took them into the den and taught them how to swing dance. Now, so we taught them how to swing dance, and then we took them to a place with a band that actually had swing dancing. So they got to see, okay, the Jaynes are weird. We know that, but we sure do love them. And she prayed this blessing. I gave some of them a Bible, and then we took them out and just did something that was so much clean fun for them. So again, it's just showing them the affection that Steve and I had toward each other. They saw that. They saw it in our home. And then showing them that being a Christian, so many of them had a bad impression of what that meant.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to come to that conclusion when you watch the news. And if you have liberal parents and that kind of is what you're hearing, but they got to see a different side of it that night. And it was just so much fun. It had a really big impact on them.
I love that. I love that story so much. I think that just sounded great. Francine, likewise, you believe it's important for children to see their parents hug and kiss. Can you talk that through?
Yeah, but can I comment first, Sharon? That story is amazing because it speaks into the reality. Like in Australia, and I suspect in America and Britain as well, the dating culture has just collapsed. Yes. And therefore, so many young people, they're interested in love and romance, but they're so anxious and nervous and scared about stepping out, that the guidelines and the rules and the norms and the traditions are also have been lost for that generation. So that's an incredible initiative. I don't know, maybe the boat has sailed for us here on that one, but if I can help introduce that here, I would certainly be doing it. I love the swing dancing idea. Back to your question, Amy. Yes, definitely. Children need to see parents hug and kiss. Obviously, they want to know that. I mean, our relationship is unique in terms of its sexual intimacy. They don't need to see, obviously, the details of the intimacy, but they need to see evidence that it is happening behind closed doors. And so, some affection appropriately and appropriate settings is really important. But I think it's also speaks also to this idea of. I think, Jim, you talked about earlier on, this, arguments and things like that, and your daughter witnessing to you, they know how to argue and make up. A lot of couples that we've worked with, they kind of proudly say, oh, we never argue in front of the children. And I'm thinking, well, A, you probably are, because arguing doesn't have to be shouting or getting aggressive. It's all that body language, that Cold War stuff, that rolling of the eyes. That's, in the technical definition, it comes under the category of conflict and arguing, if you like, or let's just call it conflict more broadly. they see that. They know we're not good with each other. But if they're never seeing us reconcile or seeing the fruits of that, or the signs that has occurred, again, they don't need to see the make-up love making or anything, but they need to know that we can argue and that we can make up.
Mhm.
And affection, that visible demonstration of affection, I think, is part of seeing that full picture. It grounds it in the reality of sometimes marriage is really hard, the relationship struggles, but we can repair. And it's when they lose confidence that repair is possible that they end up going down that path of this is over, there's no hope. The best thing we can do is just call it quits and try again with someone else. And that's just then becomes a repeating cycle.
Well, Jim, as the man on the panel, would you like to weigh in here?
All for it. I like it. It's good. Well, you know what? For one thing, what Francine is saying, what Sharon is saying, is so important because we need to present to our kids, if we're going to build a legacy, a healthy view of sexuality. Actually, a previous pope in a previous generation called it a theology of sexuality, and really, there is a theology of sexuality, and I think it's important for us to not only just talk about it, and definitely not in a lecture preaching mode with our kids, but at the same time to also, to show it, and I know for my own self, I didn't see that in my family growing up. It was a little bit like Sharon. So I didn't see that. And so I had to learn that. But then I also realized that Kathy didn't know what I wanted, or I didn't know what she wanted. Yeah. So we actually had to talk about it. And I remember a time where we were, my goodness, we love to go to movies, and we were at a theater, and she goes, you always hold my hand. I'm like, okay. She goes, but I want you to put your arm around me. And I thought at this point, I think we'd been married 40 years. I'm like, okay. So I put my arm around her, and it lasted for about a half an hour because, us men, our arms go dead after a while when we have our arms around our spouses. So I moved it and grabbed her hand, went back to grabbing her hand, and she just took my hand and she put it back around. I kind of figured that out. But, a lot of times people say to me at our marriage conferences, a woman came up to me recently and she goes, well, my husband isn't spontaneous. He isn't romantic. And I said, well, does he wants to probably please you. Honestly, he probably does. Does he know what you want or what you need? And sometimes it's not just the sex act, as Francine was mentioning. It's the acts of kindness, the acts of care. Now, Kathy and I do something on a regular basis. It's kind of been a habit of ours, and we call it the 15-second kiss. And we never time each other. Maybe I've done it as a smart aleck once or twice. But it's not the kiss you give grandma. It's not the kiss you give your kids. It's the kiss you give your spouse. You're sealing it. Even if we're not thrilled with each other at that second, we do that pretty regularly. And as girls got older, because I have all girls, they would say, as you have boys, Amy, but the girls would go, Dad, Mom, get a room, kind of, but they would smile.
I've heard that.
Yeah. So they would smile. And I actually think we did a better job at kind of showing affection than we did sometimes talking about it, because, all research shows that the more positive, value-centered sex education you give your kids, the less promiscuous they'll be and the less confused they'll be. I mean, it's incredible that both the liberals and the conservatives agree on something. But with that, they do. However, I think they also need to in the best world, if we can shower our spouse with affection, the kids see it. Now they know how to do that. What Sharon was saying, that she didn't see how to do that. Mrs. Henderson and her husband had to, kind of be that help to her to see how you do life, how you do your faith, how you do that. And I think as parents, we've got to be able to do that. We can't be so uptight about it. And by showing affection, showering affection, going on the dates, having fun, let them see that you can have fun and have romance at the same time. That's going to help that next generation, because again, we're thinking about legacy here. That's going to help the next generation big time.
Can I add one little thing too? It's not my turn, but thinking about what both of you said, and talking about when you go through arguments and making up and then seeing how to go through struggle. I think one of the problems that I'm seeing with young married people today is they don't know how to handle conflict. And we talk about conflict with arguments, but also what the kids saw with us is we had not a conflict with each other, but the struggle with the whole infertility situation. And then our second child died before she was born. And so they watched us go through how does this family handle when they're going through something like that, because they hadn't seen that. Just as the conflict resolution, but there's also just the struggles, the hard parts of life, and leaving a legacy. This is how you do it. Not saying we did it perfectly, because honestly, that was very, very difficult. But they watched what happened. They wanted to see how were they going to handle this situation.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up, Sharon. Jim, you also remember building energy in your marriage in the first years and developing and keeping good habits.
Yeah.
And that one of those is conflict resolution.
And one of it is. And, I had a marriage mentor of mine. We went to the same graduate school. And his name is Neil Clark Warren. He actually is the founder of eharmony.com. Wonderful man, wonderful Christian, was a professor at a seminary before he became the eHarmony guy. But one day I was helping him. I was doing some consulting for eHarmony on the kind of the Christian side. And we were in the lunchroom, and for me to get a chance to be with a mentor, because I feel it's so key for marriage to have mentors, and he definitely was one. And I was talking about our deal, and he said, Jim, communication is a learned trait. You can learn. Because I was just assuming that I was taking over like my dad did, and I communicated like him, which if Kathy's mom and my dad would have gotten married, it would have been World War III.
Yeah.
And Kathy was imitating her mom a little bit. And he goes, no, it's a learned trait, almost like a coach would, like on a team. And we have to learn that. And I think the first few years, there's years and years ago, we always talked about the 7-year itch. Well, that came from a movie. Marilyn Monroe started a movie called The 7-Year Itch. There's no research that, marriages fail. It actually fails in 4 years if it's going to fail a lot of times. So what I'm saying these days is we've got to put more energy and effort in those first few years of marriage when it comes to conflict, when it comes to romance, when it comes to a lot of the habits. So 2 of the habits that I'm thinking about, because I think a lot about intimacy, and intimacy means connection. It's not, us guys, we go to physical intimacy all the time. I get it. That's an important part. But, for Kathy and I, we realized we will become more intimate if we do go on those, non-negotiable date nights. So I challenge people in the first few years, are you willing to give your spouse 1% of your week? Well, nobody's going to not raise their hand on 1%, but that's actually 90 minutes of the week, and it's a date. And I know it's hard because you have babysitting issues. Some of our best dates we live by the beach in Southern California, and we would go and get coffee, and that was our date because we couldn't afford something more. Those are great things. So I challenge people to do that. And then also, spiritual intimacy. I think that's the least developed area of intimacy in marriage a lot of times, and connection, if we're talking about connection. So I challenge them to spend 20 minutes a week, not 20 minutes even a day at the beginning, but in a new marriage, if you spent 20 minutes a week just sharing, we call it our closer time. Those are habits that you then build. So in the first few years of marriage, you have habits. Games are typically won in the second half, but the way to get there is to build those, to build that foundation in the first half. And so I think things like that are the kinds of things that we've got to be talking about and doing in those first few years, so that in the later years we can actually build a legacy of success and have a successful marriage and have a successful life.
Oh, I love that. And when you're talking about that habits, just today I was at my favorite gym, and I happened to be where the mirror was reflecting at the door, and there was a husband. I've actually never seen him before. I've seen the wife before, and he must have dropped her off and was going somewhere. He actually kissed her at the front door of the gym before she went in. And I was like, they looked like they were, maybe late 30s, early. I'm like, well, how cute is that? It really struck me. I'd never seen that before. I mean, that's not normative for the gym. And I just was like, wow, that really, really set a tone.
Yeah, it's those little acts. How cool is that? That the last thing they did before they, separated with, she was at the gym, he was going someplace else, is that they sealed it with a kiss. I mean, it's so simple, but we don't tend to do that. We rush on and move and actually fail at sometimes, rekindling romance because we're too busy.
Yeah, and he initiated it.
Yay.
So I thought that was so neat. So anyway, switching gears back to leaving your legacy outside of your family, we've talked about serving in the community. Sharon, you had some thoughts about ways to serve in your community.
Well, my husband and I, right from the get-go, when we got married, talked about ways that we were going to do that. We were actually college students when we got married. Here's a little secret. It's not a secret, but we only dated 3.5 months before we got engaged and got married 6 months later. So it was pretty quick. And I want to say that we read a lot of marriage books that first year. So we decided that when we got out of schools, my husband was a dentist, and my degree was actually in dental hygiene. So we were going to serve in that way, just in the dental field. His office was just such a welcoming, warm place. I mean, they had Christian music played in the background. A lot of it didn't have words, but we knew what it was saying. And then the staff always prayed together in the morning. So, somebody could get into heaven with a broken tooth, but they can't get into heaven if they don't know Jesus. So we never shied away from sharing our faith with people. He just retired, but it was 40 wonderful years of him sharing Christ in his office. But there have been other things. Compassion International, that's one ministry that we just love, and we are very active in that. And we set up what is called a giving fund. And we each year in December, we sit down with the giving fund and decide where the money's going to go at the end of the year. And that is so much fun. I just want to tell you, I look forward to that, every year. So there's a lot of things that we've done in the community. Crisis pregnancy in Charlotte, that North Carolina where I live, that's been another passion of ours, that we've done it together. And all this is together, supporting them together, volunteering together. I've gone on trips with Compassion to El Salvador. It's just part of who we are. We just love doing it and doing it together. So we take turns writing the letters to the sponsored kids. And so it's just been so much fun to do that. And I can't imagine not doing that together. Or we don't do anything that's separate, I don't think, with ministry kind of things like that. Except I do have my women's ministry and the speaking and traveling with that. But we have loved.
Not insignificant.
We say, even with that, Steve says he has an airport ministry, so he takes me to and from.
I love that, and I love the tip to set up a giving fund, because then the money is there to give, and it is fun. Now, Francine, you and your husband's service grew out of a need.
Yeah, so our main service has been, I suppose, in marriage ministry, and there was certainly a need. So I think, Jim, you referred to a previous pope about the theology of sexuality. Yeah. I'm guessing you're thinking of John Paul II, and it was the theology of the body, which included that. Yeah, and that was a really radical kind of teaching. And he was kind of the pope that was there when we were young. We had the opportunity to meet him in our first year of marriage. We didn't at that time know that he had delivered these incredible series of audiences over 5 years. But as we've gone on, we've unpacked it, and it's been an absolute revolution to the ministry, because it speaks into this deep anthropology of the human person and being created in the image of God for each other, and unpacks the whole theology of lovemaking, of human sexuality, of masculinity and femininity, really quite prophetic for our age. So we looked at a lot of the Catholic, at that stage, marriage formation programs, and they didn't really capture this notion of complementarity of men and women, and this sort of anthropology. So we started looking at how could we integrate those, and that's what sort of birthed the Smart Loving ministry, collaborating with lots of people globally on that. But apart from that, there's been little things like in our local parish here, when we had really young children, we were finding it so difficult to get to Mass on a weekend and fulfill our need and our obligation to give due worship to the Lord. And so we committed to doing a children's liturgy. So, that's what you do, right? If you can't even get to Mass, go and commit to doing something at Mass. Is it step it up a bit, which sounds a little bit crazy, but it actually held us a little bit accountable. And when we knew that there were other families and children there waiting for us to show up, it kind of just kicked us over those, I guess, that resistance around, we haven't slept all night and we just can't face this idea of trying to bundle the kids up and all the drama of that. And that was worked with our circumstances. So I guess that would be my tip, is look at what your circumstances are and make sure your outreach can support you as well as give to others. And 30 plus years later, that's ministry is still going in our parish. We haven't moved. And we did it a little bit differently. It's Two Hearts Run now. We very much focused on letting Byron, my husband, take the lead in the teaching. And that was a bit of just a counterpoint in our parish school. It was a complete female staff, and a lot of the parish children went to the school. And so there was just this, they were getting a lot of feminine spiritual input through that avenue. They weren't really hearing a masculine voice around faith apart from the parish priest. And so we worked hard to make sure that there was just sort of getting that kind of balance. And so I would do a lot of the groundwork, but I would stand him up in front of the group of kids. We'd sometimes have 30 children there for 25 minutes, and it's a bit of a wrangle to sort of get from the church into the room and back up in that time and do something meaningful. But anyway, that was a little thing we did on the parish that I think there's some learnings around, work with the strengths and see the need. I think Sharon, you were pointing to that, but also just make sure that what you do is going to enrich what your in whatever your circumstances are.
Yeah, well, and think again about all those little lights. 30 years of wrangling cats, and all those little cats that all have grown up and are having families of their own, and the way that you planted those seeds and leaving that legacy. Well, this sounds great, but what if you don't know how to get started? Jim, you had some good advice with that.
Yeah. Well, I when it comes to getting started, I think you start small. Don't feel like you have to, do big things. But if you can do it together, it's great. And I know in Kathy's and my situation, we started together in youth ministry. And then as baby started coming, she couldn't be as busy. I was working full time in a church, and then Kathy found her niche in women's ministry. So she found her niche at first in mothers of preschoolers and dealing with that. And so I wasn't there as often, but I needed to come alongside her and support that, just like she was coming alongside me and supporting me she couldn't be as involved with the kids. So I think you gotta figure out what can you do, and it's a conversation that you have. Kathy and I literally had it. We were here with our daughter in Hawaii on a little trip, and then they've left, and we literally were talking about what are we going to do, and we're going to start something real soon for our church, not to do with our ministry or the things. And we want to do it together. And I said, well, I'll do it, but if you take the lead, not me. And it's on doing life with your adult children. It's something that I speak on, something I do. And actually, I said, but you take the lead. And you know what? She appreciated that. So just like what you were saying, Francine, sometimes we need a male voice. Sometimes the church needs female voices. Obviously, we need both, of course. And I think sometimes we have to look at what is our giftedness. Sometimes that's together. It's cool that, Sharon, you've done that with your spouse, all these things. I do have a funny story. Kathy and I are big fans of compassion. And I was speaking in Australia. We were talking about the people mover. I was speaking at the National Youth Workers in Australia. That year it happened to be in Melbourne. I've also done it in Sydney, but this one was in Melbourne. And the compassion person, the person who leads compassion in the country of Australia, came up to me after my first talk. I was going to give 4. And he said, great talk. However, you used 3 words that have sexual innuendos. I went, I did? He goes, yeah. He said, because in Australia, we have different words. Now, we see enough American television. We know what you were saying. We got it. But you probably want to know that those are not words you should probably use in a sermon. But, so there are different words besides people mover, and even different words for bathrooms, things like that. But the point I was going to say is sometimes we have the call to Christ is the call to serve, and we have to be serving. I don't think that's where you wanted me to go, Amy, but I think that's so key and critical as couples that we figure that out. And even with money, I mean, you were talking about the money fund. I mean, we had a fund where I gave each of my girls when they were little $100 at the end of the year and said, how do you want to spend it? And those 3, and then I had 100, and then Kathy had 100. And Heidi was 5, and we came back the next day to talk about it, and Heidi had lost her $100 bill.
Oh
So instead of the girls going, big all like, they're going, Heidi, you're a dummy. You got to find this. Kathy's, just absolutely trying to figure out where this. We finally found it about 2 days later. So there was tears. It wasn't this amazing thing, but it was underneath a doll in a carriage. Why she put the $100 bill, and then I got blamed for giving my 5-year-old $100 bill, which is, yeah, I probably deserve that. But the process was, let's talk about where we're going to give. One of them was to compassion, because one of the girls totally is a compassion. So she said, I think you should help. The $100 could go anywhere. And she said, I think you guys should give money to compassion. I'm going to give all 100 of mine to it. So it's the kind of thing that both as couples we have to serve, but I think we have to teach our kids to do that too. We have been involved in a home for women who have been abused, and we're not actually even able to do one-on-one ministry there. But over the years, we would bring like a Thanksgiving dinner and things like that. And the girls are now carrying that forward, and I'm really happy about that. It's cool to see it. I never thought I would see it during their teenage years. I'll tell you that much.
Oh, I love that. And you know what? I love that you mentioned you're doing life with adult children, because I think that was very meaningful to me and my friends as our boys are in their 20s. That was such good advice. I'm so glad. Well, Francine, Jim, and Sharon, you all look so put together and like you have everything all figured out. But no one's life is perfect. Everyone experiences some bumps along the way. Can you share some hope for those who might not like part of their story? Jim, what does finishing well look like?
Yeah. Well, finishing well, that's a key part. And actually, I think we start really early. So when we talk about finishing well, I don't think it's just for us old people. I honestly think it's for a younger generation to create those kind of habits that will help us to finish well. And so with that, for me, as I look at finishing well, it has very little to do with finances and, if I wrote another book or whatever. It has to do with being faithful to God and being faithful to my family and being faithful to Kathy. In 2009, I had cancer. I didn't think I was going to die. Now, my mother-in-law did. She said to Kathy, you know what? You're cute enough. And if Jim dies, you could probably find somebody else. I'm like, what? But anyway, that was her advice to my wife. But when I had cancer, one of the first words I wrote was there are phrases for my kids, but I just went, I want to finish well. I want to finish well with my marriage. I want to finish well with our kids. We actually have been on a trip with one of our daughters because she had an appendectomy the day the whole family was going to have a big trip in October. And so we took her on this trip. And I said to Kathy, this cost a lot more money than we planned. I am really glad we did this, because we're not going to miss that, but we'll never be able to repeat some of the cool things that we've just done with this one daughter and her husband. So I think finishing well means that you get your priorities straight and make your top priorities your priority. And you know what? You don't have to we all have fun stories. We've been doing this. We're also communicators, but we all have those hurts and moments. Like like Sharon was talking about infertility. Somebody's watching who has been going through infertility, and the deep pain. 1 out of 5 people here in the United States anyway have gone through some form of infertility. The deep pain and agony, and it means we have to lean into it. So you can't finish well without having people around you. The Bible talks about in Hebrews a great cloud of witnesses. Well, who are our great cloud of witnesses? Who are the people who are going to come alongside us and do life when one of our kids, gets involved in drugs, or one of them strays from faith, or they violate values, or whatever it might be? That's, finishing well says I'm making good decisions on a day-to-day basis. And significance in a well-lived life is never accidental. So we've got to make sure we're doing it purposeful. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And Francine, you agree, and you had your take on it.
Yeah, I guess one of the things we've been reflecting on, we've had a really privileged financial circumstances in our life, and the financial giving has been part of that. And I don't want to undermine the importance of our responsibilities as Christians to be tithing and to be giving of our financial resources. But I often reflect on, the widow coming into the temple and she's putting in a couple of coins, and Jesus praises her for giving all that she had. And it's causing me to reflect a little bit, particularly this year around, God doesn't call us to give volumes. He calls us to give out of our poverty, out of our scarcity. And it's really easy for us to say, oh, yeah, we'll just make a nice financial donation. And we know that the people who receive it is going to be greatly helped by that. But that doesn't cost us much. What really costs us is to give time, because that's the thing that's really scarce in our life. And we're really busy. Most people in our culture is just, it's busyness on a treadmill. We just keep getting faster and faster. And so I'm kind of thinking that the gift of time and a presence is the scarcity in our lives. It's also scarce in others' lives. And to just sort of be reflecting on how could we give our time and our personhood rather than, and in addition to our financial giving.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Well, Sharon, one of the things you've written extensively about was redeeming your story. Could you share how one of your worst chapters of life became one of your greatest victories?
I sure would love to share that. That's one of my passions, is using what you've gone through to help other people. And that's a lot about what we've talked about tonight, really. But I told you a little bit about Miss Henderson and how she led me to the Lord when I was 14. And then when I was 17, don't have time to tell the story, but my mom came to Christ through the same woman. And when my mom did that, and I would never tell a woman to stay with an abusive man, but she told my father she was going to forgive him for everything he'd done, and the list was long. And my father never drank again after that night that she came home and told him she was going to give her life to Christ. But my dad said, I'm going to go to church with you, but I could never become a Christian because there's too many things in my life I've done. God can never forgive a man like me. Well, I told him exactly what you would tell him, which was none of us could be good enough. That's why Jesus had to die on the cross for us, because we couldn't be good enough. He gave his life for us. But he could not understand that kind of grace. Well, 3 years after my mom became a Christian, so now I'm 20 years old, my father, he wasn't drinking, but he was still doing a lot of other things and going to church with us, to the Bible teaching church with people that talked about Jesus like they knew him personally. But he was on the verge of a nervous breakdown because he was being sued for something that he had done wrong in business. My mom had gone to Pennsylvania. Think about this, North Carolina. She is in Pennsylvania at a craft shop convention. She owned a craft shop. My dad got in his car, and we'll tell you this really fast, got in his car, drove to Pennsylvania, tried to find her, couldn't find her, stopped by a Catholic church. We weren't Catholic, but he was looking for a steeple, I think, and asked us the priest there. The priest was not there. And he said, I need someone to pray with me. The secretary drew a little map on a scratch piece of paper, gave it back to my dad. He got in the car and found this pastor, a Baptist pastor out in the woods, building his church, and said, I need you to pray for me. And the man sat him down, what's your name? Tell me what's going on. And I think for the first time, my dad told this man everything he had ever done. And then that precious pastor, I'll never know his name, put his arm around my dad and said, now, Alan, let me tell you what I have done. And the way my dad explained it, he said, Sharon, everything I had done in my life, this man had done too. And I knew that if Jesus could forgive him and he could be a pastor, then he could forgive me. And my father became a Christian that day in the woods of Pennsylvania with a man I will never know, and became one of the sweetest men. And here's the thing about that. The Bible tells us in 1 Corinthians 1 verse 3, it says, God comforts us in all of our affliction or trouble, so that, those are two huge words, so that we can in turn comfort those with the comfort we have received from God. It's kind of a convoluted verse, but basically what it's saying is God doesn't comfort us just to make us comfortable. He comforts us to make us comfort able. So that everything that we've gone through, the difficulties that we have gone through, God can use all of that. We've got to not be ashamed. Like Jim and I are not ashamed of what has occurred in our home as growing up. We're using it to help other people who have maybe experienced the same thing. And other, like you mentioned too, the infertility. God comforts me in that so that I can comfort someone else who's going through that same thing. Yeah. That is part of leaving a legacy. Look back at your life, see what your struggles were and how God got you through them, and then use that to help other people as they're going through those same struggles.
Oh, that is so beautifully said. And I know there are many, many people who needed to hear that tonight. So thank you for honoring us with that.
And Sharon, I was about to, when you said that he went to a Catholic church and the priest wasn't there and the secretary gave him a map to go somewhere else, I'm thinking, oh, no, sorry. But that was the providence of the Lord, because your father needed to be prayed for by a man with a similar story.
Yes,
And,
absolutely. And here's another thing too. Do you think, I'm going to preach now, just a minute. Do you think he'd been going to church with us for 3 years? Do you think there were other men in that same church who had done some of the same things? Absolutely. But they weren't talking about it. Nobody mentions it. And we cannot be ashamed of our stories, because God will use that to help other people. Remember when Jesus walked into the room to his disciples after he was resurrected from the dead? And they didn't know who he was until he did what? He showed them his scars, and then they knew it was him. And I was reading that one Easter, and it just really hit me. They didn't know him until they saw his scars. And that's the same way people know Jesus today, when we're not ashamed to show our scars and to tell our stories of how he has gotten us through.
Okay.
So that's so profound. And knowing that, we all go through things and we all struggle. I know, Jim, you're doing an adult children story. You're like, wait, I was giving ministry and sometimes my own daughters didn't want to hear it. It's like other people pay me to tell them stuff. And that was so encouraging to know that you can do things even so beautifully. And we're all similar. Francine, do you have any thoughts before we close out?
Well, I was just reflecting on that comment and thinking, in our years of different talks and retreats that we've run, the feedback that we always got was when we shared what we call them a confessional sharing, where we talk about our screw ups and how we, reacted and recovered from them. There's always those stories, the ones that they remember and that impact people. And it's not the stories of accomplishment and glory and doing it right. It's the stories of mess ups. And so I absolutely agree with you, Jim and Sharon, that we need to be ready for the sake of the gospel and for just the sake of loving other people, being prepared to expose our failings. And that's one of the most powerful ways to help others.
Jim, do you want to close this out?
Sure. I would just simply, kind of going along with that theme, the scripture says, confess your sins to one another and you'll be healed. And, we are to confess our sins to God. But at the same time, when we share, we don't have to do that with everybody, with every sin. But when we share our hurts and pains and people come alongside of us, that builds replenishing relationships and it builds the legacy so that we can have healthy marriages, not perfect marriages, but we can have healthy marriages and we can have healthy families that build a legacy. So I think that's what we're called to do.
Oh, well, I love that. Jim and Francine and Sharon, thank you so much for being here. It was such a pleasure to talk with you tonight. And I just know there were so many people that have been really encouraged by what you had to say. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, great time. I'm a new fan of Francine and Sharon. They're amazing. I'm telling you.
Well,
it's mutual, Jim. It's mutual.
One of your best sayings is keep your mouth shut. Welcome that out and your mouth shut. I say that like every day. So yeah. That's a
I think my wife said that to me a couple of weeks ago. So she shared it back
that
to me.
That has been oft-quoted amongst my friend group. Yes.
Never too late to relearn the lessons.
I love it. Well, viewers, thank you as well for joining us for National Marriage Week. You can continue to find answers to your questions at marriageweek.org.